We are broadcasting from Fort Lewis College. Fort Lewis College in the Four Corners in southwest Colorado as we continue our 100-city tour. Tonight we'll be at Mancus Opera House. Tomorrow and this afternoon at noon we'll be in Moab, Utah, and then we'll be back here in Durango. Fort Lewis College graduates more Native Americans than any four-year college in the United States. It is actually a non-tribal college. And we're joined by three of the members of this community, two of whom have organized Real History of the Americas Alternative Day of Events today. We're joined by Shirena Trujillo, who is one of the longtime organizers of this. We are also joined by Noel Alla-Ta-Ha, who is a senior here at Fort Lewis College, very active in today's events, and Esther Belin, who is an instructor of writing and a member of the Navajo Nation. Esther, I was wondering if you could read from your poetry, From the Belly of the Beast.
Amy, most people do
I said it wrong.
Mispronounce it. And, you know, I've been questioned about my title many times, and it's From the Belly of My Beauty. And the title really stems from this idea of not only our ceremony called the Beauty Way from the Navajo, but that idea, again, of all these words were, you know, circulating inside of me in terms of, you know, wind and moisture and breath. And when they came out, I wanted them to be a contribution and not take away from our ideas, I guess, of what our people are. And so I'm going to read an excerpt of a piece. I graduated from the University of California at Berkeley as an undergrad, and I was asked to present the senior speech. And, you know, I had no idea what I was going to say because I was really conflicted most of my undergrad years in terms of what my presence was at the university as an Indigenous student, seeing how most of my family was, you know, living in poverty, and even my own mother was, you know, working two jobs. And I thought, what am I doing here? And why are people paying me to read books? And so this is part of that. Surviving in this place called the United States is possible. Impossible for those who take it seriously. If I were Japanese, I would be a Nisei. I am second generation off reservation. My mother comes from the land of enchantment, now also the land of poverty, drugs, illiteracy, and confusion. My mother, like many Japanese during World War II, was relocated off the res to a federally run boarding school in Riverside, California, USA. My mother resides still, angelic, among yellow-brown haze, indigenous and immigrant smog in Los Angeles, skyscraping progress, pushing her home. I'm sure when you were young, your history books told you all about Indians. Or, I'm sure when you were young, you saw Indians on TV. You saw me on TV. Indian princess, rotund squaw, bloodthirsty brave, stoic chief, ungrateful drunk. Now, I'm sure when you were young, your fifth grade teacher couldn't tell you why. Men worked on cars and built airplanes and school buses. Men drank beer and played pool. They had friends named Buffalo Joe and Harold Jim. They laughed a lot and yelled a lot and called white men chicken shit. Men stayed at bars all weekend and wore dark glasses and sat in the back at church. Their shame silenced and their anger roared you into an arroyo, safe from them. And you didn't want to be like them, or know anyone like them, or love anyone like them again. When I was young, I saw men as father. As a grown woman, I see my father in me, become me, sitting in a bar, silencing the war cry of my mothers corralled at Bosque Redondo, numbing the wound deep in my valley of cowboy and Indians, recycling the memory of cold mountain fever.
Esther Belin, reading from her poetry book, From the Belly of My Beauty. Esther, if you can talk about what it meant to grow up, when, as you say, off-res, and what it means to live on the reservation, which you go back and visit.
Oh, yeah. So I'm a byproduct of the federal relocation and termination era in this country. And so I grew up, really living in two worlds in the LA area, and embraced every bit of that culture, which was, I lived in a poor neighborhood, but always knowing that we had that connection, right? My parents spoke Navajo, and we ate Navajo food, and our worldview really was that Navajo worldview in terms of just our placement in school. Our mom trained us from day one. When you walk out that door, people will be against you. They'll be against your thoughts. They'll be against your worldview. You really have to be prepared, because they're going to challenge things about your who you are. And you need to know the other side in order to survive, because she and my father both had really traumatic experiences in boarding school. And that was day one, what she taught us.
And those experiences were in boarding school?
Yes.
In boarding school, what were those experiences?
Oh.
Explain the Indian boarding school system in this country.
For her, my mom, always considers herself lucky in that she went to a boarding school with her sisters. And so at night, after dark, they would talk to each other and comfort each other. But during the day, they were isolated, and they were forced to, and ridiculed, traumatized around the English language. And that idea I said earlier about articulation, of course it's so hard for tribal people to articulate that. When somebody yelling and forcing you to be creative or have a say, and you don't have any grasp of the language or the context. And so, she was...
The boarding school saying you could not speak in Navajo.
Yeah, you could not speak your language, and they forced you to speak the English language. And, they forced her to choose a name. And, for a while they thought my mom had tuberculosis, so she was isolated for almost a year, and she never had tuberculosis. And so just all these traumas to her and her identity, thinking that something is wrong, and that the way they cook is wrong, and the foods they like, and they had to eat those foods. My mom still can't eat mayonnaise to this day because it just makes her sick. They made them eat the condiments, and learned how to vacuum and set tables, and be proper young women and it was in the 50s era. That's where she went.
Noel Alla-Ta-Ha, you went to an Indian boarding school in Salem, Oregon?
I did. I went to Chamawa Indian High School. And my time in boarding school was not of the traumatic experiences of my family. My parents and my grandparents went to boarding school, and my grandfather used to run away. And the Fort Apache Indian Reservation had a boarding school too. My mom went to a foster home. But my time in boarding school, I remember walking across campus and hearing Pimas talk their language, and then walking to class and hearing Chippewas talk and I was like, what is that? And that's their native tongue. But when I was 6, my mom took me to Oklahoma City, and I spoke Apache pretty much before I spoke English, but I remember being traumatized when I was 6, and my teacher laughed at me because I didn't know that the rest of the world called an apple an apple. To me, it was masana. And it was so funny to me that English is so backwards to the rest of the languages that I feel makes sense. So when Esther Belin talks about that trauma, it may have not happened to me personally, but I still feel it collectively. And Esther Belin talks about that, I am because we are, and that really stayed with me because I can't speak for all Native peoples, but I can speak on behalf of my experiences and those of the stories that other people share with me. So,
can you share a message to people who are listening and watching this broadcast now in Apache?
Very proudly.
Dagot Shirena Trujillo Shema J. Velasquez one there.
And tell us what it means.
Basically, I just introduced myself in my native tongue, and sometimes in English there are no words to express what it means to be Inde. We don't call ourselves Apache, we call ourselves Inde, the people. And what that means is we come from this land, we come from this area, we come from the animals and the earth, and we come from each other. And so when you come from a people, you learn about respect. And that sometimes is limited in the English language. You know, sometimes you have to express it in a ceremony. You have to express it by showing compassion, by dancing, by singing, by just being with someone and listening more than speaking.
Shirena, as a Hispana, how do you relate to this area of a tremendous diversity of culture and this program that you helped to establish here at Fort Lewis College on this day that others observe as Columbus Day?
As a Hispano-Americana, so I would be I'm half Hispanic. I'm what in this region of the Southwest we would call coyotes, not the coyotes smuggling people on the borders, but the coyotes that are half and half of two different cultures. So when Esther speaks about living in two worlds, the two worlds that I live in personally, my experience has been very German-American, my mother's side, Shank, Prouty, and then very Hispano-American, right here from this region. We have a saying in this area about the border didn't cross us. You know, we didn't cross the border crossed us. And so that's sort of, in this region, how we look at a lot of the history of the area. The way that this event speaks to me it feels so good, even just in this short time, to talk about it. What we're doing is giving voice to the unvoiced, and it is about looking at your own story, how you fit in the puzzle, and that's what this event has helped me do, and we're helping others do as well.
And Esther Belin, a message in Navajo.
And I'll do an introduction as well. She'e Esther Belin Yenisha Kloge Dene Neshlen Tura Chitni Bashis Chain Kitla Chitni Dashache. And for us, when we do even our basic introduction, it is, we acknowledge all of our grandparents. And so for me, I'm related to people in my mother's clan. That's who I adopt. And then through my father, I'm a sort of a distant relative to them. And then I acknowledge my grandparents. We're matrilineal, so it goes through the mother. So we have 4 clans. That's how we know, and we sort of position ourselves within our community. And you know, clans are known for different things. And for me, my clan is one of an adopted clan where, you know, there's 2 different stories I've heard, but one of them is that one of our major chief, Manuelito, his wife, as they were traveling to and from Santa Fe many times, they would stop at different Indian pueblos, Pueblo tribes on the way, and one of them was the Zia Pueblo. And they would always bring stuff to trade, blankets or corn or whatever, in terms of harvest. And the Zia tribe adopted Chief Manuelito's wife, Juanita. And so she was the first Clogue from that area. And so we're descendants of her, and that makes sense because we're part of the checkerboard region on the eastern side of the Navajo Reservation.
Well, I want to thank you all for being with us. Esther Belin read from the belly of My Beauty, her book of poetry, and she teaches writing here at Fort Lewis College in Durango. She was also joined by Shirena Trujillo Long, who is one of those who has established this special day called Real Histories of the Americas. And I want to also thank our final guest, Noel Alla-Ta-Ha, a student coordinator for Real History of the Americas Day here at Fort Lewis College. She's a senior majoring in psychology and minoring in Native American studies. When we come back, we'll be joined by Dennis Banks. He's joining us from New York, where he was attending the Russell Tribunal on Palestine. This is Democracy Now! On this day that some call Columbus Day, others talk about in a different way, wanting to bring out the real history of the Americas. Stay with us.